the biggest thing for me is just creating an environment of trust. Absolute trust, absolute transparency, and shared vulnerability.
From Coordinate Sport, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts and the stories behind their business journey. Our guest on this episode is Jack Shakespeare. He's the director of UKactive Kids and director of research at UKactive. Jack is a true champion at levelling the playing field for young people. Following a successful career at Fit for Sport and having gone through the challenges himself, Jack is well placed to represent the sector, as he does in his current role. If you're operating a sports coaching business in the UK, then you will have heard of UKactive Kids and the work they do. Jack and his team are supporting the 400-strong membership. Recorded in the middle of the second lockdown, we discuss the state of the sector at length, the post-COVID environment for providers, and Jack's focus on building a strategy that serves children from all backgrounds. As always on the pod, we cover Jack's journey to date and hear his insights on leadership. So sit back and enjoy. Okay, really excited for our guest today. We've got someone who's going to benefit our listeners greatly, I believe. We have someone who's a really, really strong champion and advocate for, I guess, the importance of physical activity and in the role it plays in children's lives. Got Jack Shakespeare with us today. He's Director of Children, Young People, Families, as well as Director of Research at UKactive. So thanks for your time today, Jack.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. Generally, how we tend to start off is looking a little bit of our early life, because we believe obviously how the huge impact that physical activity can have. So we kind of try and take it all the way back. So could you want to tell us a little bit about your early life? Hopefully it wasn't too long ago.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and again, thanks for having me on, James. Really appreciate it. It's quite a privilege. Active. I'd like to think I was sort of pretty active all my life. I had a pretty sort of, I guess in this country, traditional sort of upbringing on sport and physical activity. Played a lot of football in the winter and a lot of cricket in the summer. But I definitely had a better relationship with sport and physical activity in the sort of primary school years as I did secondary school, and I think that's probably sadly a similar story actually for a lot of people. And I actually fell out of love a bit with sport and physical activity in secondary school. Didn't enjoy PE in secondary school, and that kind of pushed me away from community sport as well. So that sort of a few negative experiences.
Do you think you could pin that down to anything? That kind of, was it a teaching experience or other students?
A combination of teaching experience, a combination of you know what it's like when you're that sort of early to mid adolescence. Your requirement and need and craving for peer support is really high, and probably higher than all else. And that need for peer approval, and I think I felt a bit that that sort of sport, physical activity, PE wasn't providing that, and pushed me away from it a bit. But fortunately, had very active dad, and he sort of supported my interests outside of school. So did sort of maintain it, but yeah, fell out of love a bit with it. It's particularly around team sports, sort of maybe a little bit let down by some of the support networks around it, but yeah, look, on the whole, pretty positive, and it's certainly something. And in fact, being brought up by quite an active family has certainly influenced the way in which I've tried to bring up my kids as well, and really try to emphasize the fun of being physically active and the adventurous side of being active with my kids.
Yeah, definitely. Whereabouts did you grow up, Jack? Grew
up in North Essex, on the border of Essex and Suffolk, in a little town called Manningtree that no one's ever heard of.
So plenty of places to go out and play though, right?
Yeah. Look, really fortunate. It's a good point. Yeah, really fortunate, and obviously pertinent in today's sort of climate, but really fortunate there were lots of space to run around. The schools that we went to, primary and secondary, both had lots of space, big fields to use, and really close and accessible sort of parks and playing fields that we used to go to as kids as well.
Brilliant. And then something else we've got in common, I think. You went down to South Wales to study. Is that right?
Yeah.
What did you study there? You obviously gone down there to do your degree, and I know you moved on from there to travel.
Yeah. Done your research, James. Well done. I went down there to study sports psychology. Just got to the point where did my A levels. Still at that point wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, not just what I wanted to study, but wanted to do as a career really. But knew that I was, had this kind of real interest in sport, but also sort of the thinking behind it and some of the psychology behind it, and really wanted to get a sort of better understanding of that. So yeah, went there to study sports psychology and had a great time doing it, and found it really interesting and genuinely draw upon some of that subject matter and learnings and experiences today in my role and in the roles before it.
Because I know you travelled across to, and it's something I'm really interested in, because travelling to the USA to coach and work over there, still now it's something that provides a massive opportunity for people looking at starting out a career. Obviously, UK education, UK coaching qualifications, etc. Obviously, background in sport makes students attractive to the American market. So I don't know how that experience for you, was it part of a university degree, or were you just over there working? How did that
no, it wasn't part of my degree, although I guess linked in regards to the subject, but no, just did it off my own back. Went over there to work during summers at university. So started I think after my second year at university, after my degree, just went and worked on one of the sort of Camp America programs as a sports coordinator in a kids camp sort of 100 miles north of San Francisco on the west coast out there.
Nice.
Landed on my feet really. It was great. And ran the sports program for 2 years running. And then when I graduated, I got really lucky, got an opportunity to go back out there and continue some of that work, continue some of that coaching on the west coast out there. So yeah, amazing experience for a sort of 23, 24-year-old. And yeah, for many reasons, coaching, but also independence, albeit obviously the States isn't a million miles away from our culture, but really unique experience and a life shaping and life defining sort of experience, which was great.
Definitely. I guess running those programs over in the US, probably be able to utilize that experience when you came back. And you worked with, I don't know if it's straight away as soon as you came back. Was that when you started work at Fit for Sport London?
Yeah.
Was it a similar type of role there? I'm interested to hear about that.
Yeah, I think so. I think going abroad to coach, it did many things, but it certainly sort of increased and gave me that zest for continuing to work in that field. I think when I did it initially during my summers at university, it was kind of let's just do something during the summers. I don't think I had many career aspirations at that point. But it certainly confirms my kind of thoughts and feelings around it, and really gave me that love for it. I think what I did get over there, which I sort of as a mindset brought back with me, was this real, this real sort of confidence and mindset that sports coaching, working with children and young people, was way more than the sport itself. And I saw for the first time, as millions of other people have seen, but I saw for the first time just how beneficial sport, community sport, can be for children and young people when it's delivered in an inclusive way, when it's accessible, when it's fun, when it's really engaging, when it's meaningful to those children and young people. And it sounds really obvious, but I saw the opportunity for sports coaching, far beyond the sport itself and far beyond, competitive outcomes of a sport. And that really gave me that zest, I guess, and that drive when I came back to continue working in that field. And that's when when I came back, I met the guys at Fit for Sport and started working there on summer camps when I came back. And then moved into London to work full time at Fit for Sport in schools and continuing the holiday camp programs.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. It's difficult to. I guess we're still challenged with that now, trying to showcase the kind of wider impact of being physically active across mental health and academics, etc., for children. But I guess in the US West Coast probably didn't harm the weather. Obviously, be able to get out there nice every day, so we struggle with that. But yeah, I mean, with the work at Fit for Sport, obviously we had Dean on the podcast recently, and his passion's infectious. So I was just interested in what it was like kind of working alongside him. I mean, putting, I guess, that passion into action. And yeah, what was your kind of role like over at Fit for Sport? What were you doing?
Yeah. So look, Dean, my ex-boss, the passion is the word, right? His enthusiasm and energy around children first and foremost, and then the use of sport and physical activity to support children, to develop children. There is no greater ball of energy than him, and that's what drew me to the organisation in the first place. Alongside, and he's still there actually, Craig Jones, who was the operations director when I went there. And actually, it was with Craig that I found someone that I shared a spirit with a bit around this, and an ethos around just the absolute fun side of sport and physical activity. Competitive sport wasn't really a thing we talked about. It was just about using sport and physical activity in games. And Craig and I played more circle games than we did anything else. To engage kids, and we felt that angle was a good angle to make things inclusive and really introduce physical activity and sport to large groups of children. So I came in as someone that worked in the holiday camps. I was a coach, as an activity instructor, and then during term time worked in schools. So breakfast clubs, lunchtime clubs, after school clubs, extended schools, supporting PE lessons, and just loved it. Just loved the whole role, loved everything about the role, loved the fact I could wear a tracksuit every day and work in schools. And I'm sure we'll explore it a bit later, but really loved that school and community link. Really loved seeing children that we would work with in schools, then in community settings, whether it was at weekend sports clubs or activity clubs, whether it was the same children coming to the holiday programs, and really enjoyed that bit and really tried to develop that side of it. And then, I was at Fit for Sport for, I think, 10 years. And by the time I left, I was running the sort of training department of Fit for Sport.
Yeah, that's something I was going to ask. I know obviously that progression is common. Like I said, some of the stories on the podcast so far, obviously coming in at the kind of entry-level coaching, maybe just some casual hours, summer coach, whatever it be, and then kind of working your way up through the organisation. In terms of that training, I know you're going to have empathy for all the other providers out there, especially in your role now. It's going to help you with what you're doing. What did that look like towards the end, obviously, at Fit for Sport? Because there's some stats around the amount of coaches in the industry that have been trained by Fit for Sport and things like that. So, I was wondering if you could fill us in on kind of what that looked like. Are you training people nationally up and down the country, or how do you?
Yeah, good question. So I'm sure the stats have changed now, but we had two sides to it really. One, a big focus on internal staff training and development. So at the time, I think Fit for Sport were employing up to sort of 500, 600 people that were out on the ground working in schools. And again, I'm sure the stats have changed now, but that, as I say, we're working in schools and holiday programs. So myself and the team were running that training department and offering a pretty broad sort of suite of training modules and courses to Fit for Sport staff that were out on the ground working in those schools and those holiday programs. Some of that training was sort of accredited, recognized training, activity leadership qualifications, that kind of stuff. But a lot was bespoke as well, sort of stuff that you don't learn maybe on a formal accredited course, running a holiday club, signing in and signing out, safeguarding policies and procedures for children's holiday programs. So a lot of that internal staff development, but also, to your point, James, we ran an external training program as well. So working with other employers and other providers up and down the country to upskill their staff to work with children and young people in their programs and all their facilities, and actually worked really closely with the sort of health and leisure sector, so leisure centres and gyms and health clubs to upskill their staff to work with children and young people in their settings.
So one of the things that kind of keeps coming up when we talk about the industry, and you probably know this term, the white van man term that gets banded around a little bit around the industry. And I know you've obviously been the lead for training for sport, you probably see that. I just wanted to know if you had any thoughts on that. I mean, it's probably a bit of a myth around the fact that I felt like it came in around the PE premium when that got launched. This term of like white van man, people just with a bag of balls going out and delivering. I mean, how would you feel about that term and your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what the term means, but I think the key thing is that the sector strives towards quality, and I think what's my sense is that what's always been lacking is a real sort of consensus around what good looks like. What are the quality standards? What are the compliance standards, and how can we really benchmark ourselves as a sector about what good looks like? And I think that's a really important piece, because if we get in place a real sort of consensus around what good looks like and what standards we need to have in the sector, and then have sort of accountability measures around it. So how do we measure ourselves against it? How do we really show what good looks like, and how do we really show the impact that the sector is having? Then I think we can go forward with that, and sayings like white van man or poor practice, then that gets exposed, that gets flushed out, because people can then really show, based on standards and based on compliance, they can really show good practice, whoever they are and whatever they call themselves. I think that's a really important part of the sector, I think, and I think that's a really important part of the future of the sector. And we do a lot of work around that at UKactive, around standards, around compliance. And I think the current climate, and I know we're not here to talk too much about coronavirus, but we can't ignore it. I think that's shown how important compliance and standards is, around guidance, around health and safety, around quality. I think what we're seeing now, and hopefully by the end of today or whenever this gets pumped out, we'll see a lift again in community sport. We'll see restrictions. We'll see a lift. We'll see a reopening of sports centres, leisure centres, and that's got to be sort of based on compliance and based on quality and based on health and safety. And I think we need to strive towards that. And then we can those any poor practice then can get flushed out.
Yeah, definitely. And you kind of touched on it already. If we want to look at, and I know all your kind of career history to date is probably standing in good stead, definitely in your role at the moment. I know we were talking about it off before we started the recording, just in terms of your role at UKactive. It'd be good to expand on that, exactly kind of what it is, what you focus on, etc., just for the listeners to know why it's such a big deal to get you on today.
Yeah, well, so I guess it's I've got three jobs, I guess, at UKactive. One is, like you said earlier, director of children, young people and families. So that is working with the brilliant team at UKactive that drives our sort of young person agenda at UKactive. So anything from the policies that we work on to support children and young people to be more active, through to the sort of strategic projects and campaigns that we drive on the ground. I sit in within that group and really try to make sure that there's a real key focus coming out of UKactive on children and young people and their physical activity levels. So sort of head up what's often externally called UKactive Kids. And then I'm also director of the UKactive Research Institute, Working with, again, a brilliant team of data analysts, researchers, to really drive that agenda forward, drive an evidence base to the whole sector, underpin the sector's work with an evidence base, and very publicly at the moment, our team is showing, talking about accountability, is showing and tracking sort of the throughput and coronavirus cases across the sector, and showing that really low prevalence. And again, based on quality standards, based on health and safety, and based on that compliance. So get to real privilege to work with two fantastic teams. And then I guess the third bit is that I sit on the exec team of UKactive. So sort of more broadly, sort of helping the organisation to move forward and progress. And that's been quite a journey, obviously, over the last sort of eight or 9 months.
Yeah, and I know obviously UKactive Kids sits within the UKactive banner. So I guess it's good to have someone like yourself banging the drum for the sports coaching, the children and young people. Alongside, they've got a lot of work on at the moment with the obviously fitness industry and what's happening there. What does it kind of look like for you, UKactive? Let's say pretend it's difficult to, but if we pretend coronavirus didn't happen, I know UKactive and UKactive Kids are going to have some strategic goals moving forward. Potentially they'll need to be adjusted, but what were the kind of the main focuses for kind of next few years?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think that obviously we are in the situation we're in, but you maintain a strategic focus. I think UKactive is a membership body, and at the heart of UKactive is that membership. That membership is 4,500 members strong, very diverse. From leisure centres like you've just mentioned there, across to gyms, both public and private, across to children's activity providers, national governing bodies, councils. It's a real mix, and a massive part of my job is maintaining, is sort of corralling that membership and really making sure that membership is equipped to support children and young people through sport and physical activity. So, so within that is really supporting the membership, is really ensuring that the membership has got the guidance, the knowledge, the information, the tools to go out there and support children and young people, whether that's through our research work, whether it's through our standards work, whether it's through our thought leadership and public affairs work. I think that's absolutely front and center. I think we've clearly had some key focuses over the last couple of years, which I think are even more important now. I mean, they were important 2 years ago. And I say 2 years ago because 2 years ago we published our Generation Inactive 2 report, which was a reflection of a big national consultation, sort of exploring the challenges, barriers, but also, what's working in regards to getting children more active up and down the country. So
with obviously membership body, and we'll leave all the notes in the kind of links in the show notes, but anyone can join. Is there any criteria to be able to join UKactive, and obviously actively looking for members all the time?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're always sort of growing that membership. Anyone can join as long as they've got an interest in getting people more active more often. I think what we do have are code of practices and standards that people can also engage in, and obviously that requires due diligence, and that requires sort of showing those key sort of operational practices. So yeah, look, we want to build the tent as big as possible and get as many people as possible in that tent, so we can really provide a fully inclusive sector. So yeah, look, if anyone's interested, obviously click in the footnotes. But I think I think for us it's we've got that sort of that mantra of more people, more active, more often, and we want to talk to people and organisations that share that goal and share that real passion. And I think again, moving forward, I think that goal, that passion, that drive is going to be more important, certainly to the health of the nation as we sort of look at how we recover from these last sort of 8 or 9 months. And physical activity, we believe, will be at the heart of that, should be at the heart of that. And no better place to start than than children. So yeah, and obviously we want to work with as many people on the ground as possible to drive that forward.
Sure. I mean, one thing that's I guess at the moment there's a real contradiction, like the issues that we're facing in society in the UK specifically. It's kind of this idea that we've got an issue of childhood obesity. At the same time, we've got an issue of kind of child hunger in certain, a lot of situations. And I guess those two things together don't seem like a problem we should have, if that makes sense. But I know you're doing a lot of work in UKactive to tackle both. So I don't know if we're going to try and talk about both. I don't know which one you want to unpack first, whether it's childhood obesity or look at the child hunger issues and holiday hunger programs and things.
Well, let's talk about them both at the same time, because I think they are interconnected. I think one of those sort of real key focuses for us as a children's team at UKactive over the last couple of years has been supporting children during holiday times. We know that children typically during certainly the 6-week holiday period, the summer holiday period, show drops in levels of activity, show drops in levels of fitness. We conducted a piece of research. Our research institute worked with actually a UKactive member called Premier a few years ago that looked at and tracked children's fitness levels across the year, broadly showing that during term time children's fitness levels increased, but during the summer holidays that those fitness levels dropped. And I think really interestingly, children from low-income backgrounds were disproportionately affected. So children from low-income families saw drops in fitness levels at a much faster rate than their more affluent peers. So really seeing an issue there. And I think that's one of the connections there, again, to childhood obesity. We also see in childhood obesity stats that the children from poorer backgrounds are more likely to be overweight or obese. And so what we're really looking at there is an environment problem. We're looking at an ecosystem problem there. The choices on offer to these children are not the same choices clearly as those choices that their more affluent peers have, whether it's access to healthy food, whether it's access to sport and physical activity. So there's something that needs to change there, because I think whatever we are doing, and I think this is a real connection between, whether we're talking about holiday hunger, holiday inactivity, childhood obesity, whatever we are doing right now as a country, as a system, it's not working for poor children. It's just not working. We see that in activity levels, and you'll see that in Sport England's Active Lives surveys. It's the children from lower income families that are the least active. It's the children from lower income families that are least likely to enjoy sport and physical activity. And again, you see that in Public Health England's childhood obesity stats. It's the children from lower income families that are more likely to be overweight or obese. So there's clearly a connected issue there, and our real drive for the last couple of years is to not talk about those two issues in isolation, is to look at the environments, to look at the ecosystems, and look at how we can work with our membership in the sector to create environments where we can start to tackle some of these quite entrenched inequalities.
Definitely. And in terms of initiatives, I know funding was just announced recently. Welcome. Kind of £400 million was banded around as a headline, but in terms of looking at the more detail on that, I guess you're the man to talk to about it. I know you've been working hard behind the scenes. Could you able to kind of give us a bit more, expand on that, and give us a bit more detail for our listeners around what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So broadly, it's broken up. About 170 million of that is to look at covering food bills for low-income families during holiday times. And then about £220 million of that is to scale up the already existing Department for Education's holiday and food scheme that's been piloted over the last couple of years. So that's been run over the last few summer holiday periods in select locations across England. But now the announcement that you're referring to and the funding that's attached to it is to scale that up nationally, to start supporting children all over England from the Easter holidays 2021.
Right. And in terms of how that's, I don't know if this has been worked out already or not, but in terms of if there's providers out there that feel like they could contribute or want to get involved with that, I guess the rollout is it based around population centres, or is it how is that going to kind of going to expand across the country?
Yeah, good question. The specifics haven't been published yet, but by all accounts, it's going to be run through and in partnership with obviously local authorities up and down the country. I think really importantly, our sector can play a massive role in supporting this scheme. You know,
they're already delivering. Yeah, everyone's delivering the holiday programs already. A lot of our listeners will be having extensive provision. So yeah, so how they tap that into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the specifics haven't been published yet. And you know, I met with the Department for Education a few days ago, and they will be issuing more guidance. But broadly, it will be going out through local authorities. That engagement with local delivery networks is going to be really important for local authorities to get these programs up and running, and or, like you said, James, plugging into already existing programs. There's lots of holiday programs that are already
not trying to reinvent the wheel, I guess. No,
absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely not trying to invent the wheel. So yeah, and we'll be working really closely with government and other sector stakeholders to make sure that we can support our sector, our members to be able to contribute and support this program, because I know that, you know, everyone that we work with certainly is chomping at the bit to support this, to support these children during holidays. So we got to make sure that we are engaged with government, central and local, to be able to support on it, underpinned, and I'll repeat myself now, but underpinned by quality standards, compliance, so that we are running really good, inclusive, safe programs that government can trust, parents can trust, children can trust, so that we can really make an impact to these children's lives.
Yeah, I guess now more than ever, the restrictions and control measures that need to be put in place, you've got to make sure that framework's there. Touching on one thing, a few I guess topics come out of it. I mean, with your research hat on, you probably have some data to back it up, or it might just be a personal feeling, but focus of yours obviously being research. I was wondering if you'd be able to give us any insight in terms of, diversity in the sector. So we're talking about engaging with people of all different backgrounds and socioeconomic status, and obviously a lot's been spoke about recently around diversity in all industries, but specifically, obviously, coaches have a huge role to play. And if young people see coaches that maybe look like them or sound like them or from the same type of background, because I don't know if UKactive has done anything on that, maybe not, but just, it'd be good to know if there's any insights.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. We haven't done any specific research on that, but I think what we do know is that we need to absolutely enable and facilitate locally led action and activation on the ground, you know, and children need to have access to positive role models that look like them, that sound like them, that really can really set and show that positive example. And I think that comes with, you're right, James, that comes with supporting developing a really diverse workforce. It's huge, absolutely huge. Yeah. And no better to start than, you know, through grassroots, you know, community, youth, sport and physical activity programs and give them the platforms, the resources, the support to really drive that. I think it's absolutely massive. You know, there's probably a lot more work that needs to be done in that space, but putting the right positive role models in front of these children and young people is really, really important.
Oh, fantastic. In terms of hopefully the last time we mentioned COVID, but in terms of its impacts, obviously huge and wide ranging, and UKactive working really closely to support with that. I guess for our sector, our listeners, sports coaching, owner operators, managers, leaders, etc. We always been saying that the demand hasn't gone away, right? All the children that they work with normally kind of been locked up for so long. The demand's huge. Obviously, we feel like it's going to come back strong. I just thought it'd be good to hear from yourself, guess, some ray of sunshine from what you see from your side in terms of what the business sector looks like moving forward?
Yeah, again, good question. And I guess some of the work we try to do is is the art of trying to predict the future a bit. I think. I think one thing. What do we know? What do we think we know? There's never going to be a more important time for our sector. Going pre the first lockdown and pre onset of widespread coronavirus in this country, we already had an issue. We already didn't. There already wasn't enough children getting enough physical activity each day. Again, we're referring back to Sport England's Active Lives numbers. We know that pre-coronavirus, less than half children were getting 60 minutes a day of sort of physical activity or less than 60 active minutes a day. So we weren't in a great place in the first place. So the need was there. I think the need is going to be even greater coming out of this. And again, hopefully we'll see some positive news today around the lifting of restrictions of youth and community sport. But I think again, going back to one of my other comments, we can't go back to, or I don't believe that we can go back to, or we can afford to go back to the old way and the old system, because the old system didn't cater for everybody. And the old system clearly wasn't inclusive enough, and the old system clearly didn't engage enough children and young people, because our stats and our and the inactivity levels were already pretty woeful. So there's going to be a huge need for this coming out, but it's going to be a need for a much more inclusive and a much more accessible sector and a much more accessible offer. Because again, whatever we were doing beforehand wasn't working for large groups of children and young people, wasn't working for children from low income families. They couldn't access it. It wasn't working for children with disabilities. It wasn't working for children from different ethnic minorities and groups. So we have to change that offer. My instinct is there's going to need to be a decent level of disruption to change that offer and create a more inclusive offer. And our sector needs to be at the epicenter of that. There needs to be agile and have the right mindset to want to change that system.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know if you're able to comment on this one, but in terms of looking back at I guess last year before the pandemic, there was an issue around, I guess, a lot with anxiety with providers around funding, PE premium funding, etc., being announced. I guess that obviously took a backseat when schools were closed, etc., and the pandemic actually took hold. But do you think that's the reason it's being held back, or the announcements aren't as forthcoming? Do you think that's around the fact that, like you said, it wasn't working before, and obviously put a lot of money into it, and maybe something needs to be done differently? I don't know if you're able to comment on that one or not. I
guess different bits in that. If you are to address the PM Scores for Premium piece, there's a lot, as like you've just said, James, there's a lot of money being pumped into that, I think, and a lot of good work has happened because of it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not shy away from that. A lot of brilliant work has happened, and a lot of high impact work has happened, and a lot of children have been helped to be more active because of that fund. It's not. I think there are some clear gaps, around accountability, definitely, around clarity of guidance, definitely. I think the biggest issue has been, certainly recently, has been the hand to mouth nature of it and the short termism of it. The situation we found ourselves in, last academic year around not having clarification around the future of it until the last minute is not a situation we want to get in. But we're sat here on the 23rd of November and we're in the same position again. So, but that needs to be cleared up. And I think there needs to be an evolution of it. And again, we've talked about accountability and we've talked about guidance, but nonetheless, ring fence funding going into schools to look at raising sport and physical activity levels is a good thing. I think broadly, James, I think the thing here is we need to get out of this short term approach to it all, and look at and start to really carve out and develop long-term commitments that outlast 4-year political cycles.
Yeah, for sure.
Focused on children's health, focused on children's physical activity, whether it is through, things like the P and School Sport Premium, whether it is through, as we've already mentioned, the Department for Education's holiday activities fund, because that is just one more year. So we're sat here and we've applauded that announcement, and it is great, and it is, that's 2 years of lobbying and really campaigning, and obviously not just us, lots of other organizations, child food poverty organizations, children's sport and physical activity organizations, Marcus Rashford getting involved. It was brilliant, but it's just 1 year, so we've just got 1 year commitment to that, and it's not even a full year. We've got,
and that it's going to take longer than a year to solve the problem, right? So
100%. It's going to take a whole generation. Exactly. So we've got 1 year of that. We've got no commitment to the P and School Sport Premium beyond this academic year, and I think, and we talked about it in Generation Inactive 2, our report. We want to see a much longer term commitment to, children's health, children's physical activity, and children's engagement in sport, and actually, some green shoots. Sport England have just opened their most recent public consultation on their up and coming 10-year strategy. 10-year strategy, that's a bold statement.
Yeah.
To say, look, this strategy is going to outlast these sort of 4-year political cycles, and we really want to lay a marker down and develop a long-term mindset. What a great opportunity that is, to look at long-term commitments to other sort of strategies and funding pots in this space. Because I think one thing on that is, a 10-year strategy. Well, that means, children going into reception class next academic year, that strategy will follow them all the way through to the middle of high school or middle of secondary school. Yeah. That's great. What a great opportunity to get hold of a whole generation of kids and see them through all the way through into high school, and harness that and support that and facilitate that. Hopefully that love for being physically active. I think long-term plans also adapt people's mindsets. If you have a short-term funding cycles, often are then driven by a real need for numbers, or a real need for, and often drive shortcuts and don't necessarily sort of lay the foundations for long-term gains. And you've just said, it takes much more than a year to change, to solve. For
sure, yeah. And I think there's a lot of organisation, obviously, like you said, that short-termism. There's a lot of people doing good work out there. Maybe the focus on data or collecting that and being able to evidence the impact needs to be there from the start. Maybe, I know obviously it's got there, but maybe it wasn't there when the premium was initially released, especially in the commercial side sector. But there's a lot of commercial businesses who are collecting data and know the impact that they're having and where they've been able to evidence that spend of each school that they're working in. So they're doing a great job. So I think that'd be something that could spread out across the other providers. Would be great.
I think you're right, and I think that measuring impact is really important. But yeah, and I think we, as a children's activity sector, we really need to get a hold of that and really need to sort of bring that in, and look at, well, what is the impact of the sector? How many children and young people is the sector is the sector engaging on a weekly, monthly, annual basis? What types of activities are the children doing? What are the age groups? Where are they doing it in school, in community settings? So we can really understand a much truer picture of what's going on, because I think, data for us it gives us state of play, but it also should be there to learn from, and paint an accurate picture of what's going on, but then gives us a platform to make informed decisions and improve what the offer is, improve the inclusiveness, the accessibility of the offer. But we can only do that if we really understand what the gaps are and what, and really start to learn about what's not working on the ground as much as what is working. But I think also there's a lot of good stuff that happens that's hard to measure. You can measure throughput pretty easily, but we need to value, just as importantly, the ability for providers, community providers, to build relationships with young people on the ground. That, you know, you and I both know the importance of trust between, you know, that local community provider and the young people that come through the doors. That's quite hard to measure, but we can't overlook how important that is. And I think there needs to be flexibility in funding and how it's worked, so that we do really value those aspects as well.
No, I appreciate that, and we're trying to switch gears a little bit now in terms of I'm talking about a lot of heavy policy stuff there, and it's been great. What we try and do on each of the podcasts is try and get a little bit of insight from yourself in terms of obviously you're leading the huge team, bringing a lot of people together. Do you have any tips on kind of leadership, or especially communication, because you've got so many moving parts within UKactive and all the thousands of members? How do you go about approaching leadership and communication?
Yeah, it's a bit, well, crash course definitely, but I think the biggest thing for me is just creating an environment of trust. You know, absolute trust, absolute transparency, and shared vulnerability. If you know, we really tried to focus a lot internally on those trusting teams, and really tried to focus on everyone within our teams having the confidence and the sense of agency where they can speak up. They have the information to speak up, and importantly, the confidence to speak up. You know, my job is just to create that environment, create that culture where people feel confident. They've got the space to raise concerns, raise challenges, but equally, and just as importantly, often more importantly, be innovative. You know, and have the confidence to bring new ideas to the table. So yeah. That openness, that transparency, that sense of trusting teams is really important to us. And I think, you know, over the last 9 months, where everyone's kind of shifted the way in which they work, and you know, you and I now obviously doing this over virtually, I think that's been more important, because you know, you've gone from often working spaces where you have a meeting and then you walk away, but there's lots of conversations that happen in the margins, to now having a meeting on the computer, and then everyone, you know, presses you know, the finish meeting button, and you're on your own again, and you haven't got that support network around you, and you haven't got that sense of validation about some of the decisions that have been made. So I think that idea of trusting teams and that idea of openness and transparency has become even more important for us, so that everyone within the team has the confidence, like I say, to speak up and speak out.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully get back in the office together soon. I don't know how long it'll take for that to happen, but last one for me, just looking at kind of your I guess your daily routine. Do you have what's a day in life look like, leading and being in your role, and do you have any kind of habits or things you do to try and stay at kind of top performance business wise? And do you have anything you put in place every day?
Good question. I don't know how top performance it is, but I mean, my routine, blimey, I've got 4-year-old triplets. My wife has 3 4-year-old boys in the house, so getting them to school in the morning is the biggest job of the day, I think. Yeah,
I've only got one, and that's hard enough. So yeah, 4-year-old.
3 4-year-olds in a shirt and tie to go to primary school in the morning is quite an interesting process. But it's an incredible leveler. It's very there's nothing, you know, nothing. They definitely keep me. They keep you grounded, the kids. But yeah, so I think at the moment, you know, I don't have the morning commute. Our UKactive's head office is in London, central London. I live in southeast London, so I don't have that commute into London at the moment. So sort of tried to replace that. I tell you, something that I've really tried to implement into my daily routine is a lot more reading. And that sounds like a really obvious thing to say, but our ex-CEO, actually, a guy called Steve Ward. I asked him when I first came to UKactive, and it was a bit of a naive question, but I said, how do you know everything? He said, well, number one, you never know everything, and you need to make peace with that pretty quickly. Otherwise you'll go mad. But number two, he said, I just read a lot. I just read. And it's a really obvious thing to say, but I carve out time in the day to read. And that's really helped and that really, it gives me a sense of calm, but also, you know, a real sense of being able to keep on up to date with, you know, whether it was different articles or different sort of sector trends, or looking back and really getting into you know, new books or whatever it is. So a lot more reading. Kids keep me humble, definitely they're a great leveler. And yeah, just look, honestly, just accepting that you'll never know everything is one of the best things that I think you can do. Because if you feel like you need to know everything, you'll never be mentally ready for anything. If you accept that you're not going to know everything, but surround yourself by people that might know different things, but also be ready to put your hands up and say, look, I don't know this. Let's work through it together. I think that's been a real learning curve for me.
But yeah, like I said, that probably goes into your leadership philosophy as well. There, if you empowering other people and building a team around you with the knowledge that you need. Yeah, definitely. I was surprised you said reading with the 4-year-old triplets. I don't know. We found the protected time to do reading. Yeah.
Well, I get up an hour before everyone else in the house just to have an hour of peace and get that in. But yeah, you make the time.
If you had a book, I don't know if you got this off the top of your head, but in terms of books, do you recommend anything that you'd recommend reading recently that you'd want listeners to check out, or you'd gift if you were going to give someone a book for Christmas?
Yeah, great question. I would say, I'm looking at the bookcase now. I would say there's 2 books I've read recently. One by Simon Sinek called The Infinite Game, and that there's a lot in that. Around that long-term thinking that we've touched on a bit in this podcast, and how long-term thinking impacts mindset. And I think that's a really good one. But then also, there's actually a board member of Sport England, Chris Grant, has recently published a book called Better Decisions. That's great. It's a bit more of a bite-sized kind of book that talks about getting yourself in the right environments and the right mindsets to make decisions. And I think, again, with the backdrop of the last 9 months, the people's ability to make decisions with other people around them in quite volatile, uncertain contexts and climates is really useful. So yeah, those 2 books are really good.
Love that. Cheers. Well, I've added them both to my list, and we'll put all the details in the notes. So yeah, really appreciate your time, Jack, and thanks very much. If there's anything you want to share with the listeners, or anywhere you'd like them to go, and obviously regularly doing updates on UK Active, but is there anything you wanted to pass on or not?
Well, I've referred to our Generation Inactive 2 report. So yeah, go onto the UKactive website, and then in the kids section you'll find that report. But yeah, go onto the UKactive website, and there's you'll be able to get an update on all the stuff that we're doing.
Brilliant. Strong reading list anyway for all listeners. Thanks very much, Jack. Appreciate your time today, mate.
Thank you, James.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_Ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.